going through one of its hibernations, but it's not showing much sign of waking up this time.
Audiences are falling off at some times of the year anyway. The summer's still fairly strong. I think the winter's getting progressively worse.
Unless the bands can really cut it, then they're not interested. They expect far more from them than they ever did before.
I don't think there's a great deal around to get excited about.
There's a lot of people out there. The audience is much healthier than the bands.
How often have you played on stage?
Three times, fourth one coming up.
How long has the band been going?
2 years in October.
3 times in 2 years.
Mm.
What is big in Auckland at the moment?
Nostalgia. Looking back.
Ain't nobody else in the whole wide world like you. Nobody turns me on, baby, like you do.
The Jive Bombers are the top draw in pubs like the Glue Pot. But the Glue Pot's one of a dwindling number of pubs to play in. There are certainly less in Auckland than a few years ago.
Once upon a time, a band like Street Talk would play the Glue Pot one weekend in the Windsor and virtually do an Auckland tour forever. And they still pulled crowds. But that audience doesn't seem to be there anymore.
Jive Bombers does pretty well, it's fairly popular. I think it would be harder for a brand new band to get started.
What sort of stuff normally plays at the Glue Pot these days?
Well, it's becoming more and more conservative.
There's less on here, perhaps, than there used to be because people are going out less. Certainly, Eddie Cook has a bit of a quality control thing about music, but it's certainly nothing to do with how old or young the band is. If a band's reasonably musical, it can get a gig here.
All the same, bands like the Mockers, whose audience are underage, have a certain disadvantage in pubs.
Well, I think some of the bands like the Mockers and the Dance Exponents realised that they were never going to crack it in pubs, basically because their audience was too old, and they finally started playing schools and places like that and reached that audience. They weren't being played on radio to a great extent at that stage, so they weren't reaching them that way. But playing schools, and then some of the live TV things they've had on radio with Pictures and Shazam, has brought them to that audience, and the kids are excited about pop music again. They weren't for a long time, not local pop music anyway.
The underage market has proved so big, they've now got their own place, called simply The Venue. Here an audience with an average age of about 15 are catered to by bands often not much older.
The Venue is basically the first club that's open for an underage audience that supplies music that teenagers want to hear.
And what sort of music's that, do you think?
Well, in an international sort of thing, it is Duran Duran, but from a local point of view, it is bands like the Dance Exponents and the Mockers.
What's it like playing to an underage crowd, and what way is it different to a club crowd?
Can't beat it.
That's right,
great. Yeah. Pubs, they got other things on their minds, sex, drugs and rock and roll. And in that order, rock and roll is last. So in a pub, they've got their booze and they got, you know, the opposite sexes to chat up.
But at an underage place, obviously.
Well, there's not that problem at all. You know that if you're playing a hall, they're there to see you.
That's right.
Which makes you feel better, and they you know, the young people feel good about it as well. They know you're going to give them a good show.
One reason why young people are getting behind local bands is radio. Auckland radio is the best in the country, with a high quota of homegrown product.
1ZM, by playing bands like Radioactive and bands like Blasé, that's given Auckland's youth another whole series of headline bands, or bands they can go and see. In Auckland, we've got the double advantage of having Radio 1ZM and Radio B playing a very large percentage of local music. They're both playing it to different areas, but at least it gets played.
People who listen to Radio B, the student station, come here, the Windsor Castle.
The Windsor's probably the most progressive venue at the moment. They've got a lot of the younger bands, a lot of the Flying Nun bands in there. But I think, from what I can gather, the best crowds they pull are when they get a band from out of town, a South Island band particularly, which is a real switch for Auckland.
We've got quite a young audience, not a big drinking audience, which is, you know, one of the reasons that in the past it was difficult to get bands into places like the Windsor.
Yeah, it goes 1, 2, 3, 4.
What's making it work is we're getting them in such large numbers that, you know, it sort of makes up for the fact that individually they don't drink so much.
This band naturally records for the Flying Nun label. But the Able Tasmans are that rare thing, a Flying Nun band from the North Island, from Auckland in fact.
Yeah, you watch him lie, yeah, watch those eyes, watch him while he talks, yeah, watch his walk, watch his walk.
Well, Auckland being the centre of things as far as the media goes, I've always thought it's an unfortunate place for a band to actually form in, because there's a lot of pressure to sort of be like overseas bands, and, you know, like bands form with the intention of being like, you know, maybe like U2 or and Psychedelic Furs or whatever, whereas the South Island bands tend to evolve. They're just writing their own songs, and however they develop, you know, whether they're any good or bad or whatever.
And get their own sound together.
Get their own sound together. Well, it is, you know, they create their own sound.
I think the people that go to see Flying Nun bands are more likely to go out to the pub. You know, they like live music, they like risks. Maybe that's why discos are popular up here.
And they are still.
Because there's no risks.
Crash goes love. What I want is standing so close, touch away.
What sort of people would that attract?
For want of a better word, trendy, I suppose. A lot of hairdressers, a lot of fashion designers, people like that. People that were into punk music a few years back, their attitudes have changed. They've got slightly older. Their music tastes have changed.
You do have live bands up here, though?
Yeah, we do have live bands up here, you know, from time to time. But the people that come up are far more colourful than the people that are in most of the bands that are in New Zealand. So consequently, they're more entertaining to watch. There aren't really the amount of live bands in Auckland to be able to support that sort of system. I also don't think that the punters themselves really want those bands.
Why not?
They're maybe not as patient as they used to be.
Do you ever play any local music up here?
Yeah, we do play local music from time to time, but it's restricted, definitely. It has to fit in with the format of the music that we're playing up here, and there aren't many bands that do.
What sort of bands, perhaps, would you occasionally play here?
Car Crash Set, we usually play their releases.
There's a lot of recording being done at the moment. A lot of good stuff too.
Do you find that people are spending more time on their recordings?
I think so. I think the quality of recordings improved too. We've got some good engineers here now.
I think the New Zealand sound is changing and getting better, right through from the 8-track stuff right through the 24-track. It's a pride in the sound that you can get. Even just rehearsing in the studio like this, you become sort of more attuned to it. It's more fun.
You think that you can make a good go of it purely on recorded output?
We like to think we can,
Well, it's entirely possible, I think. It's easy to go out and buy a record from an overseas band who you might never ever see live.
There's no moans about Auckland radio. It's totally geared towards playing local singles, that's for sure.
It's really opened up.
So you can actually, if you like, do your performance through the radio now?
And video, yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's a changing thing of presentation. Like, when we play, we only like to play for half an hour, because I certainly get a bit bored with any band, really, after half an hour. I think that's a great length of time to play, and then it goes straight back into whatever they want, serious drinking. We don't really need to play We're aware of overexposure, especially with this sort of music, and basically we can afford not to.
The excitement isn't there, you know, the people aren't going out looking for something to get excited about.